Mary Toft, baptized 21st February 1703, January 1763, was an Englishwoman from Godalming, Surrey, who in 1726 became the subject of considerable controversy when she tricked doctors into believing that she had given birth to rabbits. In 1726, Toft became pregnant, but following her reported fascination with the sighting of a rabbit, she miscarried. Her claim to have given birth to various animal parts prompted the arrival of John Howard, a local surgeon, who investigated the matter. He delivered several pieces of animal flesh and duly notified other prominent physicians, which brought the case to the attention of Nathaniel St. Andre, surgeon to the royal household of King George I. St. Andre concluded that Toft's case was genuine, but the king also sent surgeon Cyriacus Allers, who remained skeptical. By then quite famous, Toft was brought to London where she was studied in detail. Under intense scrutiny and producing no more rabbits, she confessed to the hoax, and was subsequently imprisoned as a fraud. The resultant public mockery created panic within the medical profession and ruined the careers of several prominent surgeons. The affair was satirized on many occasions, not least by the pictorial satirist and social critic William Hogarth, who was notably critical of the medical profession's gullibility. Toft was eventually released without charge and returned home. The scandal left a lasting impact on public trust in the medical field, contributing to widespread skepticism about the competence and ethics of physicians during that era. The story first came to the public's attention in late October 1726, when reports began to reach London. An account appeared in the Mist's Weekly Journal on 19 November 1726. The poor woman, Mary Toft, was 24 or 25 years old. She was baptized Mary Denier on 21st February 1703, the daughter of John and Jane Denier. In 1720 she married Joshua Toft, a journeyman clothier, and together the couple had 3 children, Mary, Anne, and James. As an 18th century English peasant, circumstances dictated that when in 1726 Toft again became pregnant, she continued working in the fields. She complained of painful complications early in the pregnancy, and in early August ingested several pieces of flesh, one as big as my arm. This may have been the result of an abnormality of the developing placenta, which would have caused the embryo to stop developing and blood clots and flesh to be ejected. Toft went into labor on the 27th of September. Her neighbor was called and watched as she produced several animal parts. This neighbor then showed the pieces to her mother and to her mother-in-law, Anne Toft, who by chance was a midwife. Anne Toft sent the flesh to John Howard, a Guildford-based man-midwife of 30 years' experience. Initially, Howard dismissed the notion that Toft had given birth to animal parts, but the next day, despite his reservations, he went to see her. Anne Toft showed him more pieces of the previous night's exertions, but on examining Mary, he found nothing. When Mary again went into labor, appearing to give birth to several more animal parts, Howard returned to continue his investigations. According to a contemporary account of the 9th of November, over the next few days he delivered 3 legs of a cat of a tabby color and 1 leg of a rabbit. The guts were as a cat's, and in them were 3 pieces of the backbone of an eel. The cat's feet supposed were formed in her imagination from a cat she was fond of that slept on the bed at night. Toft seemingly became ill once more, and over the next few days delivered more pieces of rabbit. As the story became more widely known, on the 4th of November, Henry Davenant, a member of the court of King George I, went to see for himself what was happening. He examined the samples Howard had collected and returned to London, ostensibly a believer. Howard had Toft moved to Guildford, where he offered to deliver rabbits in the presence of anyone who doubted her story. Some of the letters he wrote to Davenant to notify him of any progress in the case came to the attention of Nathaniel St. Andre, since 1723, a Swiss surgeon to the royal household. By the middle of November, the British royal family were so interested in the story that they sent St. Andre and Samuel Molyneux, secretary to the Prince of Wales, to investigate. Apparently, they were not disappointed. Arriving on the 15th of November, they were taken by Howard to see Toft, who within hours delivered a rabbit's torso. St. Andre's account details his examination of the rabbit. To check if it had breathed air, he placed a piece of its lung in water to see if it would float. which it did. Saint Andre then performed a medical examination on Toft and concluded that the rabbits were bred in her fallopian tubes. In the doctor's absence, Toft later that day reportedly delivered the torso of another rabbit, which the two also examined. The story became a national sensation. Although some publications were skeptical, the Norwich Gazette viewing the affair simply as female gossip. Rabbit stew and jugged hare disappeared from the dinner table, while, as unlikely as the story sounded, many physicians felt compelled to see Toft for themselves. The political writer John Hervey later told his friend Henry Fox that every creature in town, both men and women, have been to see and feel her. The perpetual emotions, noises, and rumblings in her belly are something prodigious. All the eminent physicians, surgeons, and man midwives in London are there day and night to watch her next production. John Hervey, 2nd Baron Hervey. Under St. Andre's strict control, Toft was studied by a number of eminent physicians and surgeons, including John Mowbray. In The Female Physician, Mowbray had proposed women could give birth to a creature he named a sooterkin. He was a proponent of maternal impression, a widely held belief that conception and pregnancy could be influenced by what the mother dreamt or saw, and warned pregnant women that over-familiarity with household pets could cause their children to resemble those pets. He was reportedly happy to attend Toft, pleased that her case appeared to vindicate his theories, but man midwife James Douglas, like Manningham, presumed that the affair was a hoax, and despite St. Andre's repeated invitations, kept his distance. Douglas was one of the country's most respected anatomists and a well-known man midwife, whereas St. Andre was often considered to be a member of the court only because of his ability to speak the king's native German. St. Andre therefore desperately wanted the two to attend Toft. After George I's accession to the throne, the Whigs had become the dominant political faction, and Manningham and Douglas's Whig affiliations and medical knowledge might have elevated his status as both doctor and philosopher. Douglas thought that a woman giving birth to rabbits was as likely as a rabbit giving birth to a human child, but despite his skepticism, he went to see her. When Manningham informed him of the suspected hog's bladder, and after he examined Toft, he refused to engage St. Andre on the matter. To be able to determine, to the satisfaction and conviction of all sorts of persons, other arguments were necessary than anatomy or any other branch of physic could furnish. Of these, the greatest number are not judges. It was therefore undoubtedly very natural for me to desire that people would suspend any farther judgment for a little time, till such proofs could be brought of the imposture as they required. James Douglas. Under constant supervision, Toft went into labor several times, to no avail. The hoax was uncovered less than a week later, on the 4th of December. Thomas Onslow, 2nd Baron Onslow, had begun an investigation of his own and discovered that for the past month, Toft's husband Joshua had been buying young rabbits. Convinced he had enough evidence to proceed, in a letter to physician Sir Hans Sloane, he wrote that the affair had almost alarmed England, and that he would soon publish his findings. The same day, Thomas Howard, a porter at the Bagnio, confessed to Justice of the Peace. Sir Thomas Clarges that he had been bribed by Toft's sister-in-law, Margaret, to sneak a rabbit into Toft's chamber. When arrested and questioned, Mary denied the accusation, while Margaret, under Douglas's interrogation, claimed that she had obtained the rabbit for eating only. Manningham examined Toft and thought something remained in the cavity of her uterus, and so he successfully persuaded Clarges to allow her to remain at the Bagnio. Douglas, who had by then visited Toft, questioned her on 3 or 4 occasions, each time for several hours. After several days of this, Manningham threatened to perform a painful operation on her, and on 7th December, in the presence of Manningham, Douglas, John Montague, and Frederick Calvert, Toft finally confessed. Following her miscarriage, and while her cervix permitted access, an accomplice had inserted into her womb the claws and body of a cat and the head of a rabbit. They had also invented a story in which Toft claimed that during her pregnancy and while working in a field, she had been startled by a rabbit and had since become obsessed with rabbits. For later parturitions, animal parts had been inserted into her vagina. Pressured again by Manningham and Douglas, it was the latter who took her confession, She made a further admission on the 8th of December and another on the 9th of December, before being sent to Tothill Fields Bridewell, charged on a statute of Edward III as a vile cheat and impostor. Her earlier unpublished confessions, she blamed the entire affair on a range of other participants, from her mother-in-law to John Howard. She also claimed that a traveling woman told her how to insert the rabbits into her body, and how such a scheme would ensure that she would never want as long as I lived. The British Journal reported that on the 7th of January 1727, she appeared at the Courts of Quarter Sessions at Westminster, charged for being an abominable cheat and impostor in pretending to be delivered of several monstrous births. Margaret Toft had remained staunch and refused to comment further. Mist's Weekly Journal of 24. December 1726 reported that the nurse has been examined as to the persons concerned with her, but either was kept in the dark as to the imposition, or is not willing to disclose what she knows, for nothing can be got from her, so that her resolution shocks others. On 7th January 1727, John Howard and Mary Toft appeared before the bench, where Howard was fined £800, 150,302 today. He returned to Surrey and continued his practice, and died in 1755. Crowds reportedly mobbed Tothill Fields Bridewell for months, hoping to catch a glimpse of the now infamous Toft. By this time she had become quite ill, and while incarcerated had her portrait drawn by John Laguerre. She was ultimately discharged on the 8th of April, 1727, as it was unclear as to what charge should have been made against her. The Toft family made no profit from the affair, and Mary Toft returned to Surrey. In February 1728, recorded as 1727 Old Style, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, noted in the Godalming Parish Register as her first child after her pretended rabbit breeding. Little is known of Toft's later life. She briefly reappeared in 1740 when she was imprisoned for receiving stolen goods. She died in 1763, and her obituary ran in London newspapers alongside those of aristocrats. She was buried in Godalming on the 13th of January 1763.